Dima, are you back? She's probably in another call.
Lorraine, can I ask, have you facilitated on Skype for business?
Skype business, no.
No. Okay.
Yeah. Why do you ask?
No, because one of the companies have asked me to start working on Skype for business, and I just wanted to find someone who actually is using it as a system. I've never used it for work.
Oh yeah, same. Is it very different? Okay. Oh, thank you, Dima. Is it very different from just the regular Skype?
I have no idea.
Okay. All right. So the recording has started. So I'm just gonna get going. Maybe we can chat about that afterwards. Okay. Can you see my screen? The session there. Okay. So welcome to today's session. This is our third session in for the academic literacies facilitation for ENG3701. But as we said, that the content, the purpose of these sessions are not necessarily content specific, but we do try to relate it back to the module content. So I'm not going to go through the little admin stuff because I believe that we are well familiar with it now. But I do just want to reiterate that the one-on-one consultations are available. So if you want us to cover something that is not being covered in the sessions, then you can schedule a one-on-one consultation and we can cover it in there. Or if you have missed a session and you feel that that session would have been really good for you to also partake in, especially the exercises and activities, then we can then schedule a one-on-one session to sort of run through that particular session again. And I think it's always nice when we do have the opportunity to work through activities and exercises in these sessions. It really brings out that practical element that we're wanting to have with these sessions. So it's not just a case of listening to my voice, but also really practically engaging with the material, because I mean, ultimately that is how we get better at something, when we keep practicing and we keep working at it. So I just want to just put that out there again, that feel free to schedule one-on-one consultations. I am very flexible and available to work on you with that. All right. So okay, just covered that. So just to cover what we looked at last week, we focused on we first focused on text analysis, drawing from our first session where we talked about the importance of text analysis and what it does for us. We went into an activity last week where we analyzed a piece of text from our prescribed textbook for this module, ENG3701. We went through that text and we were able to really step-by-step analyze, asking ourselves very important questions about the text, which helped us further understand what it is the text was trying to say to us, what message the author wanted us to go away with. We analyzed things like the style, the vocabulary of the text, the tone of the text. So we did analyze at the level of lexis, grammar, vocabulary, and I keep forgetting the fourth one, but we analyzed at those levels, and it was quite a fruitful exercise. So from there, we segued into essay formats, because I mean, the point of our analysis, or for this particular module and for maybe many other modules that you will have to, that you are doing, is for some sort of assessment, right? And for this particular module, our assessment is essays. So I understand that for your assignments and for your exams that you will be writing essays. So I felt it was important that after we're done an activity on how to analyze, we go into what about the essay. Yeah, we go a little bit more into the essay, and we really just looked at the essay format. In the essay format, we said that there are traditionally 5 sort of sections in the essay. We've got our introduction. Maybe let me pull this up so that you can follow along. Yeah, I'm just going to pull this up very quickly. Okay, so this is just part of our session last week. So we said that as part of our essay, the essay format, we've got our introduction, we've got our 3 body paragraphs, and then we have generally our conclusion. And of course, this is dependent on the length of the essay that is required. So if you're asked to write a 2-page essay, of course, you would have less paragraphs than you would if you're writing a 10 or even 15-page essay. But generally, you want to have an introduction, you want to have body paragraphs, and then a conclusion. In our introduction, we really just said, just picking out the main points that we discussed. In our introduction, we said that just as a runner sort of puts their full force at the beginning of the race when they have all this energy, so is a reader most alert, and the attention span is at its peak at the beginning of reading something. So it is important when we are writing our essays that our introductions be very catching and should immediately get the attention of the reader and make the reader want to continue reading. And the introduction has to essentially be able to communicate to the reader what it is the essay is all about. Right. We looked at some introductions there of various things that can be covered or should be covered in the introduction. And then we looked at what your main body comprises of, which is essentially your body paragraphs. And this is essentially where the meat of the essay is, or where the main information is. And usually not usually, but all points that are covered in your body of your body paragraphs should be supported by evidence. So we do find that a lot of students, when writing, they make statements and just continue writing, but that is actually it's lacking, because in every essay, every sort of statement that one put out needs to be backed up with evidence. So we looked at the importance of having evidence, or basically just elaborating on points that are made, and the importance of having, the appropriate vocabulary for the type of essay that you are writing. But also very important, we did say that each paragraph should ideally only cover one point. So you don't want to have multiple important points all clumped up in one paragraph. You want to break it up, have one point per paragraph, so that you can properly elaborate and provide evidence, and just tie that point up really nicely before moving on to the next point. Right, we then just looked at some examples there. And then we looked at and then it's the conclusion, which is our finishing. And we said just as you need a strong start, you need a strong finish in a race or even in your essay writing, because your conclusion is ultimately the last thing that the person is going to read. And when the person puts your essay down, whatever you've had in your conclusion will still be ringing in their brains. So it doesn't just go away. So that's why it's important to have a very strong finish that summarizes the main points, but also gives your overall concluding remarks. And a strong finish usually also has some sort of personal or social connection. So if we are talking about the spread of English over the years, you want to find a way that maybe in your final sentence to show how important or just how important the language has come to become in our current context, or just any sort of social connection to show that you do understand how the theory that you've now been engaging with relates to society or relates to the real world, because that is a very important, sorry, I'm seeing a, yes, because that is a very important aspect of academic writing. I think that we get stuck in the theory, and at some point, our lecturers and the examiners also want to see that what you have written and what you have read, you're able to apply to the real world. I mean, that is the point of our formal education, or ideally, I believe the point of our formal education is so that we can relate what we've learned into the real world, so that we can solve problems in the real world. So it's important to show that connection, ideally at the end of your essay, close to the end of your essay, so that we can see, okay, you really see where this fits in the real world. So that's what we covered last week. Do you have any questions on that before I move on?
Yes, I had one. Consistent in form. When you say consistent in form in the paragraph, are you referring to the idea that you're working on in that paragraph? What does the form part in that mean?
Okay, so consistent in form really is the look of your paragraphs. So ideally, you want to have the paragraphs each be round about the same length, if that's the word, size, just round about the same size. As in, if your 1 point is 7 lines, it really looks odd if your second paragraph is 20 lines, right? So what that communicates is that you maybe didn't have as much to say about the first point, or you don't know enough about the first point to match. Or it just shows an imbalance in the knowledge of the various points. So ideally, you want to have sort of consistent size paragraph sizes. I mean, more or less, if it's eight lines in the one paragraph, maybe 10 lines in the next paragraph, but it does look a bit out of sorts if one paragraph is a full page. Of course, that in itself is just doesn't make for pleasant reading experience. And then the other paragraph is just like 3 or 4 lines. Does that answer your question?
That makes complete sense, and now I can understand why I get marks against that. Okay, good. Okay. And then the other one was just on the conclusion, personal and social connection. So that would be my view of whatever the given question or whatever it was that you're writing about. Would it be your view?
So it depends on what the topic is about and what they have asked you to write on. or what position your lecturer has asked you to take. So if it's a purely maybe comparative study or comparative essay, you're not really required to bring out your view. But in that case, then you would just try to connect it to just to current reality, or just that a one-liner that will link it to what's happening now or why this is important. Yeah, just some sort of social connection between theory and real world. Yeah, I don't know if that is clear. Maybe I can try to find an example.
Okay, I will look into that some more, and if I have anything, I will ask you about it.
Okay, all right.
Thanks.
Cool. All right, so that is what we looked at last week. And from there, I really wanted us to today to look at the process of essay writing. So last week we looked at, fine, this is what your essay is supposed to look like in form. And now I just wanted us to chat through the process so that once you do get to preparing for your assignments, although I think that you may have submitted your first assignment already, but maybe the next one, that there's some sort of guide as to how to best go about it. And at this point, I really will encourage you to just take down or take note of anything that you remember in your experience in your essay writing, what your marks have been, and what maybe you felt you didn't understand as you were writing, and then we can discuss it closer to the end. Okay, why is my hand up? Oh, my hand should not be up here. I just want to share the screen. Okay, so in this process, I want us to look at planning, drafting, and revising for an effective essay or for effective essay writing. Oh, sorry, I am losing. Right. So, I mean, I think one of the first things that I'd like to point out is the importance of writing multiple drafts. This is something that usually we don't make time for, we usually just don't make time for it because, life happens and you open your eyes and one day it is 2 days before your essay submission. So with only 2 days, you don't have time to write multiple drafts. So with only 1 day, sometimes it's only a couple of hours. And some students are very good at writing an essay the night before. And, we say that, we work best under pressure, which, I mean, could not be true. But really, if you want a really top class essay, I think that giving yourself the time to write drafts is really going to help in refining the quality of work that you produce. So why it's important to, write multiple drafts, I think it's quite, it's a case of, again, like practice makes perfect. Even if you're looking at the same thing multiple times, you're bound to find mistakes that you would not have seen the first time that you wrote it. You're bound to be able to pick up on punctuation mistakes or poor structure or incorrect vocabulary, grammar mistakes, so things like that really, if you're writing an essay in a rush to submit the next morning, you're gonna bypass all of that. So it is important to really give ourselves time to read through and make those drafts as we go along. So also another really important reason is that as we go through the writing process, so as you're repeatedly rewriting an essay. And here, when I say multiple drafts, I'm not saying like 10 or 8. Really, even 2 or 3 drafts is okay, because as you go through the process of writing, new issues or new ideas will actually come to you. So in your first draft you've written, it may be good, but if you were to just put it down and come back to it the next day or 2 days later, you'd have new ideas, or you'd see that, oh, I can actually connect these sentences a bit better here, or, well, this looks a little bit repetitive. I can remove this. This isn't really adding to the discussion. So you're able to add content. Really just make your writing better, but also be able to find mistakes, like I said. So the first draft is usually a lot longer. It's a bit more disorganized, and I think that maybe I'll chat about it in the next section, but it is important for us to be just to be kind with ourselves, especially in that first draft. It does not need to be perfect. I think we get stuck a lot, and I've experienced this myself as well, with that first draft, because we want it to be perfect. And by wanting it to be perfect, you're putting so much pressure on yourself, you end up delaying it because you can't find the perfect opening. So you end up delaying the process, whereas you could have just written whatever came to mind in that time and let it sit and come back to it and fix it. So yeah, those are just some of the points on that. So the first stage is, of course, with essay writing. Again, I feel like these stages are often overlooked, but so important, is the planning stage of your essay. So within the planning stage, we want to look at 2 very important parts. The first being determining your purpose and your audience. And this, what is great is when you've done a text analysis, you would have started asking yourself these questions. So once it comes for you to start writing an essay, you are going in also writing, but asking yourself, who is my audience? And you will write then according to who your audience is. So the first thing is, of course, you determine your audience, determine your overall purpose. Why are you writing this text? What is it supposed to be doing? Right? So different pieces of writing do different things. Are you meant to be convincing someone of a particular argument? Are you meant to be just informing someone about a particular phenomena? Are you meant to be critically engaging with a particular topic? Are you just meant to be like unpacking it? So you're doing different things, and it's important to know what the purpose of the essay is. And usually you'll find this purpose in your essay question. So when you read whatever the question the lecturer has given you, if they're saying compare Old English versus New English, the vocabulary of Old English versus New English, that word in compare is where you know what the purpose of your essay is for, right? And so you can write knowing that, okay, I'm meant to be comparing. So if you find yourself just describing Old English, then you go back to your question, and then it says compare Old English and New English. I need to bring in a description of New English and look at the differences and similarities, and really write a comparative essay on that. And then secondly, you, of course, we said identify your audience. You need to know who you're writing for. Is it just for your professor? If so, the tone, of course, will be very different from if you're writing for some friends, or if you're writing for students or high school, primary school learners. So when you're thinking about the audience, it's one, of course, to know who you're writing for, so you can write and adapt your tone and your vocab accordingly, but also to know what expectations the reader will have on you. So if you know it's for your lecturer, what are the expectations that your lecturer is having of you from your writing? Of course, you then will know that it's content, but it's also like vocab and syntax and all of these things. And you will also find this then in if you are provided a rubric. So this is a good place to be able to see what exactly is my lecturer going to be looking for when they read my essay. You know, it's not just the content. How are they going to be evaluating my writing? Looking at the rubric is a good way of knowing what your lecturer is looking for. And then you consider yourself as the writer as well. And here is you, and you think about what point of view are you taking. And usually this will stem from your purpose. So what are you supposed to be doing will determine what point of view you're taking. If you're meant to be critically analyzing something, you know you're taking a point of view of, oh, I'm critically looking at something. I'm not, you know, leaning towards one or the other. I must be very objective. But if it is a case of, you know, giving my opinion or my thoughts on a particular topic, then I know that, okay, it's going to be a little bit more personal. I can say that actually this is what I think. But usually in academic writing, we do use the third person, and it must be generally more formal, unless it is specifically stated. For example, I'm not sure if you do ENG3702, where they are asked to write different types of text. So a blog page the language that you'd use in a blog page will be very different from the language that you'd use to compare Old English versus New English in a very formal academic text. So yeah, I do. Yeah, so generally this is where you determine what tone you're going to take and what style you're going to employ. Any questions at this point?
Thanks, Lorraine. I had a question in the beginning. I wanted to find out when we were talking about the draft. Okay. Can we talk a little bit on that? Because that is something I think is really important. I've watched a few YouTube videos on it to try and help myself there with that. And what I find becomes quite overwhelming is when I'm searching for my sources and I'm trying to figure out, you know, which sources to use where, and I think I get overwhelmed by the referencing aspect a lot. But besides that, I think it's very important to maybe just home in on the draft part of it first, so that almost like you get a kind of a sense of what should your first draft right in the beginning look like, that first thing you do.
Okay. I wonder if we did touch on it last week, although we looked more at an outline, you know, really before you start, just having that outline of what points you want to cover in each section of your essay. But all of that forms part of your planning, right? So your outline and your draft, they go hand in hand because you're planning how you're going to go about writing your essay. So maybe can we just table that for now, and then maybe at the end see.
Sure.
Talk more on the draft in particular, because the draft is your essays just in draft form. It's just like your first thoughts, but before you get to the draft, you would have needed to sort of do this planning of how you're going to organize your thoughts, how you're going to organize your points, and then that will help you draft your draft. Right.
Okay. The reason I also asked it, and we can definitely sort of shelve it until afterwards, is that what I did see as a tip was that you have your first window open that kind of just on your document that just gives you whatever you find, almost like your search window.
Yeah.
And then you go into another window and you start then expanding on what you found. Something like that almost. I don't know if that made sense.
Is that so? I think, are you talking about the organization of your actual paragraphs?
No.
Yeah.
This is at the very beginning when you've landed your topic. You've understood, like you just said now, you've understood exactly why, what is the purpose. You figured that you've gotten that, and then you've now got to find, where am I going to start unpacking this? So in a sense, almost, because I was in a really bad habit of just writing. And then as I go along, I'm finding my sources. But as the years have gone, and now in third year, I find that doesn't work so well anymore.
Right. So I mean, so I'd say that you do need to, of course, when it comes to the point of your lecturer now asking you to write an essay, I think the assumption is that you know enough about the material, right, to engage in a written piece on it. So at that point, you would have, or yeah, the assumption being that you would have seen this content already, you would have engaged with it. And when you now see a question asking you to compare Middle English to modern English, you would know where to find this information.
Okay. Yes.
And
Yes.
you would know where to find this information, and you would know sort of the story around that section. So most of the times, I think when you get the question, it's sort of a prompt to go back to that section in the textbook or whatever it may be, and reread that section while you're looking at the question, so that you can start now looking at or looking for the answers to your question within the text. Because the first time that you're reading it, maybe you were just reading it, to get through your course material. But the
Yeah.
next time you're reading it, you're reading it to look for specific things. If they're asking you, to discuss the vocabulary changes of Middle English, you go back to Middle English and you read under vocabulary and you start noting down, what are the dates, how was it established, when did changes come. So you start noting down those points, and those points will then become sort of your essay points, or then the things that you will expand on once you get to your draft.
Okay.
I don't know if that
Is there a definitive system in which you should do that? Because what I can share is what I do. So I will do exactly that. I will re-engage with the content, go to the specific in terms of the essay question, and then I will glance at who has the writer of my study guide used to reference. So I will then make a note of those authors and what they're referencing in content. But I find that gives me way too much content for a 25-mark essay.
Right. Yeah, I mean that, and I think this is why it does take so much time. Like reading, writing an essay does take so much time, because unfortunately it is, unless someone else has a different method, unfortunately part of it is just having to read through a few articles to find that one sentence or that one paragraph that brings it all together, or that will add to your essay. And I think this is why we find, like, theses or just articles, even like a 10-page journal article would have 3 or 4 pages of references. It's not that they found everything in all of those sources. It's just like maybe one source had one little point or one little paragraph that they were able to use, and the other source had like maybe another little paragraph. So you're not going to find everything that you need in one source. So you will have to read a bit widely. If it is a very broad topic, we'll have to read widely to then find the things that will add to your essay. So unfortunately, I don't have like a quick fix for that. It really is just a case of reading as much as you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So does that sound sensible? Just that method. Is there another method besides the one that I'm using?
I think the one that you're using is sensible. Using the sources that the writer has used. But then, of course, you can also just maybe go and do a Google search or a Google Scholar search. Type in the keywords, and you might actually find sources that are easier to understand, more concise, shorter, and then read through those as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Cool. Yeah, and then still part of our planning, we then look at the topic. Of course, in this case, it says we select a topic or you are given a topic. This is then when we do that analysis or the research that we were just talking about, having to actually go out and see what writing is already exists, or what literature, or what content already exists on this topic. You develop a thesis, and then you organize your ideas. So selecting a topic, I think I'm going to skip that, because at this point we are given a topic, and it usually is quite specific. So it doesn't require any narrowing down. So doing that necessary analysis or research, that really is the aspect we had just been talking about. And then from there you develop a tentative thesis, and that is essentially the main point or the main statement of your essay, what you will be doing. Usually if you're given a topic, then you can sort of just paraphrase the topic into a thesis statement. And then, determining the ideas you will include in your essay and organizing them. This will then come from your analysis and your research, but also looking very closely at your question, because when you are faced with so much information, that is when it becomes difficult to then say, okay, what do I need? What is irrelevant? Or like you said, if it's only a 25 mark essay, I don't need everything in the book or in the chapter. So this is where you start that process of thinking about what you need, and really letting the question guide you becomes important. And then, of course, just to remember the overall structure of our essay that we did discuss last week, and then to basically try to do a very rough outline of populating. Okay, introduction, I'll talk about, or even just keywords, I think, to get you started. Introduction, I'll talk about history or importance of English in history. And then, I'll close it off with a thesis statement saying that, in this essay, I'll be discussing in my body, I'll look at this, in your paragraph. So just putting out key points in your outline to just guide the structure and flow of your essay. Okay. And then we get to then drafting. So all of that happened, and it feels like quite a lot to happen before we've even like really written something. But by the time you have gotten to the drafting, you have an idea of what you're going to talk about. You have an idea of the direction your essay is going, because you've let the question guide you, and you've gotten the necessary information and sources that you're going to insert to back up whatever statements that you make. So then our second part would then just be our drafting, where you now actually just draft the essays using the plan or that outline as a guide, but of course making changes as you go along. Right. You just feel free to stop me at any time. And then at this point, at the drafting point, is also then where you start focusing on getting your ideas down and getting them down in maybe more fully, in fuller statements. I think that's the better word, because in your outline you had maybe just made points and you had just made key terms that you're going to refer to, and in your drafting stages you will then flesh it out basically a lot more. And just a note that at this stage, it's important to not slow the process too much by being overly critical of your writing and trying to fix things as you're going. I think we are just always in the habit of fixing things as we go, but at this stage it's really not necessary, because you are going to hopefully come back to it and fix it. So here it's really just getting your initial ideas, your initial arguments down, and backing it up with the sources that you got from the first step. Okay. Do you have any points on that? Any questions? Any points on that? Oh, wait, sorry. Okay, sorry. I have not been seen the hand. And
no, it's fine. I meant to put it down.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm okay there, because we just kind of covered that.
Yeah.
But I still think that, I mean, probably like in postgrad, it must be so much more work, because you are doing, 4,000 words and more. So it must be quite difficult. Yeah, I'm struggling just with something that's 7 pages. So yeah.
It is. It really. Actually, I wouldn't say it's hard. I think it's more that it consumes a lot of time. It's so time consuming, especially at postgrad level, when you are asked to write a literature review, for example, which, I don't know, goes anywhere between 30 to 50 pages, like maybe in the master's or the PhD. Even in the thesis, in the honors thesis, I think you could have maybe a 10, 15 page literature review. And just to get those 10, 15 pages, you would need to have read so much. And there's nothing more frustrating than reading a whole 10 or 15 page article only to get to the end of it and not have gotten anything from it. Nothing that you can use in your review or in your essay. So yeah, it is quite a process. But yeah, it is. That's just how it is. But I mean, I think there are, of course, tips on how to prevent that, because it, really just like reading the abstract of a paper if it is an academic article, and it has the keywords that you've typed into your search, into your Google or Google Scholar search. Reading the abstract and reading the conclusion is a nice way to know if that article or that document will actually give you the information that you need. So if you read the abstract and you see that, oh, actually this might have what I need, then you'd be encouraged to, read the whole text. But if you read the abstract and you find that actually like it's not really clicking, you can go ahead and read the discussion section where the author sort of discusses their findings, and the conclusion, and there you might probably find something or not. But that's just maybe just a little tip there to prevent having to read a 15-page article and get nothing out of it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, and then we go into the revising, and this is, I think, where all the repeating happens, the write and rewriting happens. And that's why it's so important to allow for, to allow enough time for a revision, and also allow enough time between the drafting and the revising, because sometimes you need more than 1 hour to get a fresh brain. So usually like 1 day is a good time span to come back to something you've drafted, because it's a new day. You can look at it with fresh eyes. And then really when you're looking at your essay and the structure of it, it would be important to focus on global issues first. And what I mean by that is just the things that are most important to the overall essay, points that are going to add the most value to the essay. So focus on those first. So if you have a number of points in your draft, and it does happen when you've read a lot, when you've read widely, now you have so many points. Look at what is the most important point. What am I asked to do most important? What are the aspects that I'm asked to look at specifically, and focus on those first before focusing on, there are some things that add to the discussion but are not vital to the discussion. So those things need to really be highlighted in your essay or in your paragraphs. Okay, I thought that was a question. And then, at this point, you can also start asking yourself some key questions like, does the thesis present the main point? When you read your draft and you look at your question, can you say that I've answered the question, right? Does the thesis focus on the key question? And then it's important to also ask yourself, like, is the essay unified? Basically, the way that you've written it, do all the ideas in your essay relate to each other? And here you want to look at those linking words. Have you linked or connected all of the points nicely? I mean, there's nothing worse than, well, there are more things worse than this, but reading an essay where the student is speaking perhaps on, let me see if I think of an example now. Okay, silly example, but hopefully will bring the point across. If the essay is about dogs, and then in the first paragraph, the student speaks about different breeds of dogs, and then just cuts it and goes into how dogs are man's best friend, without really linking that first paragraph to the second paragraph. It's just a bit disorienting for a reader to, like, okay, we were just talking about different breeds of dogs. Now you're telling me dogs is a man's best friend. Sure, it may relate to the essay question, but there's no link, so usually you want to have the last sentence in a paragraph link to the first paragraph, to the first sentence in the new paragraph, right? Just something that shows that there's like a unified train of thought here, that there's a logical flow in the way that you're thinking about it, right? So for example, in that example, I would have at the end of the types of breeds paragraph, a sentence saying, though there are many breeds of dogs, we found that, or the readings have found that Labradors are the most friendliest, or have interact best with humans. So that sentence gives the reader an idea that, okay, the next thing coming will probably have to do with the relationship between dogs and humans, or, if it's a Labrador specifically and humans, you see. So in that next sentence, I can start with, dogs have been known to be man's best friend. Just something that connects it.
So in saying that, would it just be a single sentence?
Usually a single sentence will suffice, to link it. But of course, from a higher level perspective, there has to be a logical flow. So if I'm talking about types of dogs, then types of dogs, then I can go specific and be like Labradors in my next section, and then I can talk about the relationship between Labradors and humans. So you see that I'm going sort of from a general to specific, but you can see that there's a logical flow of the topics.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
No, that does make sense.
Okay, cool. So, and then we also want to look at we looked at the logical flow. Does it just logically, does it go into each other? Is there a unified train of thought? But also, does it provide enough evidence? So like I said earlier, every statement should ideally be backed by evidence. And so how usually we are taught in postgrad we write essays is you have your sort of statement or your position statement, and then you have evidence to back it up, or a source that has written on this. You have evidence, and then you have an example. Ideally, I mean, it doesn't work for all types of essays, but ideally you want to have position statement, evidence, and example, especially if you're being asked to explain some more theoretical concept. The example shows the reader or the lecturer that you actually understand the theory, and you understand the concepts that we are using, and you're able to apply it. So that becomes very important. Cool. So evidence being very important, and then and then I suppose at this point is where if your essay lacks, or your draft lacks evidence, if you feel like there's a statement that you've made but you've not backed it up with anything, then that's an area that you can maybe mark to come back to, so that you can make sure that you do add some evidence to it. And evidence could just be that, listen, someone else I'm not the only person saying this, someone else has also said this. So you can get a source that is basically said the same thing that you're saying, but in a way to corroborate your story. So yeah, evidence doesn't necessarily have to be like data. It can just be that, listen, this other author has written on the same thing, or this study has shown, and that provides evidence to your claims. Cool. So I think I mentioned this now, C, which says we move to more local issues, that just flows from, moving from more general to specific. And yeah, those are, I am maybe not going to repeat those, but here you really just want to see that all your ideas are organized, like we said, are organized into good topic sentences, that they are presented really effectively, that your sources are documented. Again, I suppose you'd be looking at the same things, but ensuring that as you move from the general to specific, that you're following the same guidelines. And I suppose at this point, you can also start looking at things like your grammar, the spelling, how can you rewrite certain phrases, does the verb tense make sense? Are you using the right word in the right place? At this point, I suppose at the local issues then not only being your topic, how you're structuring your topic from more general to specific, but also you start looking at more specific issues of the essay itself at this point. Yeah. And then you want to, once you've now sort of written this draft and you've revised it maybe once or twice, it becomes helpful at this point to get feedback. If necessary, of course. I think this is not necessarily required or would not be required for everyone. But to get feedback and help from like sample readers, a professor, a friend, or even the writing center, to just let them see what you've done. And it's always nice when students go to for example, like their tutors and the writing centers with a draft, and the draft of course doesn't have to be perfect, but just knowing that okay, the student has worked on this, it gives the tutor or the writing center, the writing assistant, something to work with. And I think that this is actually why, maybe just to go point a little, the writing centers at the university that I was at was actually very underutilized. And I always found that it was because, well, most of the time we were writing essays 1 or 2 days before submission. And the writing center had a very strict rule that said you can only come, like, I think it was a week before your submission date, and you needed to have at least one like fully written draft. So a week before submission date was like a bit of a stretch for us students. So we always found ourselves wanting to go to the writing center, but then not being able to go because, yeah, we didn't have our essays ready a week before. So, yeah, but the writing center is a very, very good service that I would encourage everyone to use. So
But
at this
I
point,
can say now already that on all my chats, everybody struggles with everything that I struggle with. Everyone. And I mean, why is everyone not here today?
right.
So it's the same, I suppose, the same time. I actually didn't know that the writing center can be, sort of be there in that kind of support.
Mm.
Or maybe I didn't do my job to read up more so that I know that I have that available to me, and I will try. But again, I will try to also do that because I think that's really good, to know that you can actually do it in that manner, particularly if if that's your intention and you want to do postgrad, then I suppose that will be good.
Yeah, exactly. And they give you some very, very useful tips and yeah, just little tips on how to make your essay better at all levels. And I think that's what's so great about it. I mean, they help you
Mm.
with a language and structure and flow, and just thinking about, especially sometimes when you've looked at something for so long, you think it's fine, but just having a fresh pair of eyes, an
Yeah,
expert pair of eyes look at it, they don't study what you're studying, but they're just looking at it from a place of, does it make sense? Like, do I,
yeah,
as someone who
yeah,
doesn't know anything about this topic, do I understand it? And that's how you know if you've got a good essay.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, definitely I wish people made use of that a lot more as well. Yeah, and that we really be able to help with more specific issues, and help with just alignment and formatting and all that stuff. So highly recommended. And maybe just a tip that I found quite useful was to work from a hard copy when you've got your draft. I know in the digital age, we're doing everything online, but I found that when you are revising something that you've written, sometimes it's nice to have the printed version of it in your hand so that you can see how everything comes together instead of having to scroll down and see, okay, what does the last paragraph say, and it's easier to make notes and to see if there's a link missing or something. So I mean, that's just a personal recommendation that I would say, like, make it's really nice to make comments and notes on a printed essay. So that's just something from me there. And then you want to read your draft out loud and listen to what it sounds like. So sometimes when we're reading in our heads, we kind of read very fast when we read in our heads, firstly. And so we're not giving ourselves the time to really absorb every word and see how it all sounds, how it comes together. So reading it out loud actually helps you to hear if it sounds right, just in terms of language and grammar also, like, does it sound right out loud? And here you can see if a sentence, especially if a sentence is too long, when we're reading it in our minds or when we're not reading it out loud, you kind of just read. But once you read it out loud and it's a 3-line sentence, you get out of breath, and that's a sign that, okay, no, this sentence is way too long. But you're not going to have that experience if you don't read it out loud. Your brain sort of will just continue reading 3 lines of one sentence. Also, pro tip, a sentence should never get to 3 lines, because then it's way too long. Yeah, just a little point there. And this is also where you're able to identify if you need a better transition or better linking words, especially between those paragraphs, and identify issues with sentence variety and unnecessary repetition. This is also something we tend to not pick up on as we're writing, where you want to emphasize a point and you find yourself just saying the same thing, but with different words. So reading it out loud really also helps with, like, wait, that kind of sounds like the same thing I've just read. So that's another point there. And then finally is our proofreading, where you proofread the final product or the final essay to ensure that it's correct, that it's complete, and that you're happy with it. And I mean, I think if you've gone through all of these points, if time allows, or set parts of all of these points, you get to a point where you are actually quite happy with your essay, and you feel that it sounds right, it flows right, the writing is good, it has answered the question, and at this point you can go back to your essay question, read the question, and then you'd be able to determine if, oh, have I actually answered the question, and also go back to your rubric and really basically mark yourself or check the rubric against your essay. Do I have any grammatical errors? Now you can check for that as you're proofreading. Have I ensured that I covered this part of the text? Have I ensured that I covered vocabulary properly? Have I ensured that I've given each part of the essay, like I've done due diligence to each part of the essay? So this is where I think you can sort of like tick off for yourself and be sure that you're submitting something that matches or that meets the requirements of your lecturer. Right. Okay, so that was it. So for last week's activity, I asked the participants in last week's session to read through the chapters that are required for the completion of assignment 1, and to develop a draft that we would then talk about and note any concerns and questions. But of course you weren't here, so that's fine. But have you started working on your assignment? Maybe if we can start from there and see if any challenges have come up so far besides what we've discussed.
Okay. Can I just ask one question before we do that?
Of course.
Transition, you mean when I've gone from one idea around what I'm explaining to the next idea? Is that what transition relates to?
Yes.
Okay.
So those linking sentences.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Regarding essay writing, I've submitted 2 and I'm busy working on 2. And challenges, what I mentioned in the beginning, the fact that I struggle with the variety of readings because it's just so much. And trying to kind of, I liked your tip that you gave earlier with regard to, sort of the abstract part of it and the conclusion. And
The discussion.
I struggled with that. The other thing I struggled with was kind of understanding. I think I raised this in the first week as well. Understanding what is considered with such a lot on social media as well, on different things. So say for instance you have a question on crime. There's a lot of, how much of social media content are you allowed to even include if you are talking about something that isn't scientific?
Okay, so honestly, there are lots of studies on an example like crime. So rule of thumb is unless the lecturer has said, use social media or recent like newspaper articles to as backup or as the sources for your essay, I would stay away from social media as a source because it's not credible. Social media content is not credible, and that an important part of academic writing is having credible evidence and credible sources. So you want to reference someone who is, or a study that has been done, because you know that it meets the requirement of the scientific community. Sorry. And that essentially that it's credible. So social media posts should not even factor in it. I think you can use social media as to maybe guide your thinking around the topic, especially if it's a topic that you're not very aware of too well. You can use maybe some posts, but I mean there will always be an academic article or a book written on that topic that you can source.
Okay. I struggled. The reason that came up was because I struggled for this one particular zoomed in community that I had to focus on for the essay, because that is what was based on crime, but specifically in this one community. And I struggled to find research, that could lend itself easily to that. I had quite a vast range of readings that I did in the end to be able to find more background and enough information that could explain to me why that community was being or was seen as a target for that type of crime.
So did you use newspaper articles, because those would be a better source?
Yeah,
and that also
stuck to that. I eventually just stuck to that because I wasn't sure about the social media part.
Right. Yeah, I mean the newspaper, at least you can reference it, and I mean it's not ideal, but I think depending on the topic, if that's the sources that the topic lends to, then that's fine. So I think you did well there. Cool. So, okay, you've already talked about the elements that you think you'd be able to include, so especially with the research, the finding the relevant text and finding relevant sources. So now, what would be your next step? have you written a draft for the essay that you still are going to do? Is that
Yes,
something that you would
I
now?
am in draft 2 already.
Oh,
Not quite the way you had explained it, but in some form. And I have been thinking about maybe printing it so that it's a bit easier to look at, more pleasant, I think, to look at than just looking at it digitally. And I think I'll try that for this one because the one is quite demanding. Yeah, it requires quite an deep sort of overview. So my next step would be that, to kind of re-look at the draft that I have
Right.
and perhaps go into a print for it and then be able to, I don't know, maybe just check that I mean, you've given me wonderful tips tonight because I recognized a lot of what I needed in the advertising.
Okay.
So that's really been very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. Thank you so much. So that's it for today's session. Next week, I am wanting us to look do some more sort of practice of the essay writing because I mean today was a lot of like me talking. So I do want us to also like just delve in and actually workshop some of the things that we've been talking about. But yeah, I think that's it for today. Thank you so much for participating and engaging and attending, of course. And I will see you next week.
Thank you.
I
So
will. Yeah.
on the essay writing part, I'm not doing your ENG course. Can I use what I'm doing?
Yes,
Or how
of
will we
course.
do it?
Yes, you can. You can use any writing. So it's going
Okay.
to be more general. So it won't be specifically, but I will just be referring to the content in this module because so that it is a bit more relatable for the participants who are doing the module. But
Okay.
yeah,
Thank you very much.
will be general.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
I
you.
think the evaluation form was posted in the chat. So if you could please just complete that before you go, and then I'll wish you a good evening.
And to you, and to you. Thank you again. Go back
Thank
home.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.